Axiom Sage, timeless wisdom from the East to transform your mind and spirit presents 10 powerful self-discipline techniques to control your mind and life. Exactly 2,500 years ago, in a small village in the mountains of China, a man watched silently as a young disciple destroyed, for the third consecutive time, everything he had built in recent months. The young man pounded the ground with his fists, shouted at the sky, promising that this time it would be different, but his eyes already bore the familiar shadow of foretold defeat. The old master, who would later be known as Lao Tzu, whispered something that would forever change our understanding of what it truly means to have self-control. His words have echoed through the centuries until they reach you, who right now struggle with the same inner demons that tormented that young disciple. Because the inconvenient truth is this: you've probably tried to discipline yourself dozens of times. You've made endless lists of goals. You've promised yourself Monday would be different. You've downloaded productivity apps. You've read self-help books. And yet, here you are, still searching for the answer to a question that should be simple. Why can't I control my own mind? I am one who walks between the ancient and modern worlds, a silent witness to the truths that transcend time. For decades, I have studied the masters who understood the deepest secrets of human nature. Men like Lao Tzu, who discovered that true power lies not in strength, but in the wisdom of when to apply it. Miyamoto Musashi, who won more than 60 duels not by the speed of the blade, but by the stillness of the mind that wielded it. And Sun Tzu, who taught that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. But today, you and I find ourselves faced with a paradox these masters knew well. Those who try hardest to control their lives are precisely those who have the least control. Have you noticed this? The more rigid you become with yourself, the more your mind seems to rebel. The more rules you create, the more ways your psyche finds to sabotage them. It's like trying to hold water in your clenched hands. The more you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. This phenomenon is no accident. There's a hidden architecture behind every failure in self-discipline, an invisible pattern that governs why 90% of people repeatedly fail in their attempts to change. And the most surprising thing is that this pattern was completely deciphered over 2,000 years ago by people who had never seen a smartphone, never experienced digital anxiety, never lived in a society that transformed attention into a commercial product. They understood something our age has forgotten. True discipline is not a war against oneself. It's a dance. It's not repression. It's redirection. It's not brute force applied against the mind's natural impulses. It's the subtle wisdom of working with the inner currents rather than against them. Lao Tzu observed that water is soft and flexible, yet it can pass through the hardest rock. What he discovered about the nature of water applies perfectly to the nature of the disciplined mind. It does not break through obstacles by force. It works around them, wears them down patiently, always finding the path of least resistance that takes it exactly where it needs to go. But there's something even deeper here, something only true seekers understand. You're not here by accident. It's no coincidence that these words have reached you at this precise moment in your life. There's an invisible intelligence that governs the encounters between prepared souls and ancient wisdom. The ancient masters called this Wu Wei, the action that is no action, the perfect moment where effort and naturalness meet in harmony. If you feel like you've tried everything and nothing has worked lastingly, if there's a part of you that suspects there must be a more elegant way to transform your life, if something deep inside you recognizes the truth behind these words, then you're ready to discover what few human beings in each generation discover: that the most powerful self-discipline is the one that feels like no discipline at all. But before revealing these ancient techniques, I need to share with you the exact moment everything changed for that young disciple. It was a cold winter morning, and he had just broken yet another promise to himself. This time, it wasn't just personal goals, it was something deeper, more painful. He had promised the person he loved most in the world that he would change, that he would be different, that he would finally gain control over his destructive impulses, and failed again. Sitting there on the cold stone floor, tears of anger and shame streaming down his face, he asked the question you've probably asked yourself in your darkest moments: why am I so weak? Why can't I just stop? It was then that Lao Tzu approached, and said something that sounded like a cruel riddle. "My young friend, you fail because you try to triumph. You lose control because you seek to control. You become a slave precisely because you strive to be free." The disciple looked at him with a mixture of confusion and despair. "Master, your words make no sense. How can I stop seeking control when that's exactly what I need?" Lao Tzu smiled with that serene wisdom that only true masters possess. "Look at the water in the river, my young man. Does it have any power? It's as soft as silk. You can walk through it effortlessly. Yet, over the centuries, it carves mountains and moves gigantic boulders. How is this possible?" "Because it doesn't fight against the rock," the disciple replied, beginning to understand. "It finds its natural path, flows around obstacles, persists without forcing." "Exactly," the master confirmed. "And now tell me, when you try to discipline yourself, do you act like water or like a hammer trying to break the stone?" This conversation, which took place over 2 millennia ago, holds the key to understanding why you've been fighting so hard against yourself. You were taught that discipline is war. War against your impulses, war against your weaknesses, war against the aspects of yourself that you consider inadequate. But the masters discovered a revolutionary truth. The most effective discipline is not the one that wins through force, but the one that wins through intelligence. Sun Tzu, in his work on strategy, taught that knowing the enemy and knowing yourself is the path to 100 victories without defeat. But he also revealed something even more profound. Supreme excellence consists in subduing the enemy without fighting. Applying this to the internal battle of self-discipline, we discover that true power lies not in suppressing our impulses, but in understanding them so deeply that we can redirect them. Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary samurai who remained undefeated in more than 60 deadly duels, discovered that his moments of greatest power came not when he forced an attack, but when he waited in the state he called mind like still water. Perfectly calm, perfectly receptive, ready to respond instantly to any move of the opponent. Now, apply this wisdom to your personal struggle with self-discipline. How many times have you tried to attack your bad habits directly? How many times have you declared all-out war on your compulsions? And how many times has this approach resulted in lasting victory? The brutal answer is that this strategy fails because it is based on an incorrect understanding of the nature of the mind. Your mind is not your enemy. It is a wild horse that needs to be tamed with patience, not a whip. It is a river that can be channeled, not dammed. It is a natural force that can be directed, not destroyed. 1. The silence before the mental storm. Let me reveal the first technique that completely changed that young disciple's life. And that can change yours too. But first, I need you to understand something fundamental. Most people try to discipline their minds when they're already in complete chaos. It's like trying to calm an ocean during a storm by shouting at the waves. Lao Tzu observed something extraordinary about the nature of water. Before every great movement, there is always a moment of absolute stillness. Before the wave breaks, there is an imperceptible pause. Before the river changes course, there is an instant of hesitation. And most importantly, before every destructive impulse in your mind, there is a sacred space, a rift in time where all the power of choice resides. The problem is that you've been trained to ignore this space. We live in a culture of instant reactivity, where impulse and action have become one. Feel anger, explode. Feel desire, satisfy it immediately. Feel fear, run away or freeze. We've completely lost the ability to inhabit that sacred moment between the emotional trigger and our response. Miyamoto Musashi understood this principle viscerally. In his deadly duels, where a fraction of a second determined life or death, he discovered that he won not through the speed of his sword, but through the conscious pause that preceded each movement. He cultivated what he called a mirror mind, perfectly still, yet capable of instantly reflecting any change in the environment. This first technique is called mountain breathing, and it's simpler and more powerful than any complex meditation method you've ever tried. It works like this. The exact moment you feel a destructive impulse arise, whether it's the compulsion to check social media when you should be working, the desire to eat something you know you shouldn't, or the anger that wants to explode in words you'll later regret. Stop. Don't try to suppress the impulse. Don't fight it. Simply acknowledge its presence and imagine yourself as an ancient mountain watching the storm pass. Mountains don't resist the wind. They simply stand motionless as the turbulence passes around them. Take one deep breath, holding this image. The mountain doesn't judge the storm. It doesn't try to control it. It simply observes, with the infinite patience of someone who has seen thousands of storms come and go. In this state, something magical happens. You realize that the impulse isn't you. It's just a phenomenon passing through your consciousness, like a cloud passing through the sky. Modern science confirms what the ancient masters already knew. There's a neurological interval of approximately 90 seconds between the emotional trigger and its crystallization into compulsive action. This is your moment of power. This is the sacred valley where transformation becomes possible. 2. The forced discipline trap. But here we come to the second obstacle that must be understood before any technique can truly work. There is a type of discipline that is, in reality, resistance in disguise. It's when you force your mind to behave in a certain way through sheer willpower, completely ignoring its intrinsic nature. Lao Tzu taught that the rigid and hard will fall, the soft and weak will remain. This isn't just a poetic observation about nature. It's a fundamental psychological law. When you compress a spring beyond its natural limit, it eventually not only returns to its original position, but explodes with even greater force in the opposite direction. You've experienced this, haven't you? Have you tried extremely restrictive diets that resulted in even worse binge eating? Have you created strict exercise routines that lasted a few weeks before you gave up completely? Have you tried to completely eliminate a habit, only to find it returning with double the intensity? This happens because you are fighting the natural current of your psyche, instead of learning to direct it. The human mind has natural rhythms, energy cycles, and legitimate needs that need to be acknowledged, not denied. When you try to impose an artificial pattern that completely ignores these internal rhythms, you are creating an unsustainable tension that will eventually break. The perfect metaphor for this is bamboo. During devastating hurricanes that destroy enormous, ancient trees, bamboo remains intact. Why? Because it has learned the art of intelligent flexibility. When the wind blows, it bends until it almost touches the ground, but it never breaks. Its strength comes not from rigidity, but from its ability to adapt to external forces without losing its essence. How does this apply to self-discipline? It means that instead of creating absolute, inflexible rules, you need to develop adaptive principles. Instead of saying, "I'll never eat sweets again," you learn to recognize when your body truly needs sugar after intense exercise, for example, versus when it's just an emotional impulse disguised as a physical need. Instead of forcing yourself to wake up at 5 a.m. every day because you read that successful people wake up early, you learn to observe your natural energy cycles and create a routine that works with them, not against them. Some people are naturally more productive in the morning, others in the evening. Forcing yourself against your natural biology is like trying to swim against the current. Sun Tzu teaches us that every battle is won or lost before it is fought. The battle of self-discipline is lost the moment you approach it as a war against yourself, rather than as an intelligent alliance with your own natural strengths. 3. The invisible addiction of instant reward. Now we come to the most dangerous territory, an addiction so subtle and pervasive that most people don't even realize they're addicted. It's the addiction to instant gratification, and it's literally rewiring the neural circuits of your mind without you even realizing it. Here's the truth no one wants to hear. Every time you give in to an immediate reward impulse, whether it's checking your phone when you should be focused, eating something sweet when you're stressed, or procrastinating on a difficult task by watching videos, you're not just satisfying a momentary craving. You're training your brain to be more impulsive next time. This is because your neurological system was designed thousands of years ago, when our survival depended on immediately seizing any available source of pleasure or nourishment. Sugar was rare and precious, so we developed powerful circuits that rewarded us intensely when we found it. Safety was uncertain, so we developed a tendency to avoid difficult tasks when more pleasurable alternatives were available. But now we live in a world where sugar is on every corner. where endless entertainment is available in our pockets 24/7, where we can indefinitely avoid any discomfort or boredom. Our ancestral survival circuits have become traps in modern society. Sun Tzu observed that every battle lost makes the next one harder to win. This is literally true at the neurological level. Every time you choose instant reward over long-term satisfaction, you strengthen the neural connections that facilitate impulsive choices and weaken the connections that facilitate self-control. It's a vicious cycle. The more you give in to impulses, the more impulsive you become. The more impulsive you become, the harder it becomes to resist the next impulse. And the cruelest part is that you don't even realize it's happening because each individual decision seems small and insignificant. But there is a way out, and it doesn't involve total deprivation or superhuman willpower. The key lies in what I call conscious substitution, a technique Zen masters intuitively mastered. Instead of trying to eliminate the urge, which creates resistance and eventually an explosion, you redirect it into actions that serve your long-term evolution. When you feel the urge to check social media, instead of fighting it or giving in completely, you can redirect it to send a loving message to someone you love. You're still satisfying the urge for social connection, but in a way that builds real relationships rather than passively consuming them. When you feel the urge to eat something sweet out of stress, you can redirect it to doing 10 push-ups or taking a 2-minute walk. You're still dealing with stress through physical activity, but choosing one that strengthens your body rather than overwhelms it. The art is not in denying that impulses exist, but in becoming the conscious director of where they point. Lao Tzu would say that you are learning to be like water, always finding the most natural path to flow, but consciously choosing which one to follow. This is the difference between deprivation, which breeds internal rebellion, and intelligent exchange, which breeds genuine satisfaction. You're not losing anything. You're gaining something better. You're not denying yourself pleasure. You're choosing pleasures that build rather than consume. The secret lies in understanding that true discipline isn't about deprivation. It's about trading 5-minute pleasure for 5-year satisfaction. It's about choosing rewards that make you feel stronger the next day, rather than weaker. 4. Phantom time. How we stopped living in the imaginary future. But there's an even more subtle dimension to indiscipline that few recognize. A time trap that keeps you stuck in an endless cycle of anxiety and procrastination. It's what I call phantom time, when your mind perpetually lives outside the only moment where real power exists. Observe your mind right now. Where is it really? If you're honest, it's probably not here with me, absorbing these words in the present. Part of it is anticipating what it needs to do after this video ends. Another part is rehashing something that happened yesterday that still bothers it. And a third part is creating future scenarios, worrying about things that may never even happen. Lao Tzu understood that the wise man does not grieve over what is past, nor worry about what is to come, for he lives fully in the present. This is not just a pretty phrase. It is a precise neuroscientific observation. Your ability to make conscious decisions, to exercise self-control, to feel genuine satisfaction, exists only in the present moment. When your mind is fragmented between past and future, you lose access to your inner command center. It's like trying to drive a car while looking only in the rearview mirror and never out the front window. You'll inevitably crash into something. Indiscipline isn't a character flaw. It's a symptom of a mind that's lost touch with the present. When you procrastinate, you're not being lazy. You're escaping the anxiety of confronting a task in the here and now. When you binge eat, you're not just satisfying physical hunger. You're trying to fill an emotional void created by disconnection from the present moment. The technique that changed everything for that young disciple is called present anchor, and it's surprisingly simple. Before any action, especially those you tend to do on autopilot, take a single, conscious breath that brings you fully into the present moment. It's not formal meditation. It doesn't require any special posture or prolonged time. It's simply the act of anchoring your attention in the present before acting. When you eat, pause for a moment and truly feel the hunger in your body. When you check your phone, pause and consciously ask yourself, am I doing this for a specific reason or just on impulse? The power of this practice lies in a fascinating neurological discovery. conscious decisions made in the present are neurologically distinct from automatic reactions. When you are truly present, you activate areas of the prefrontal cortex associated with self-control and long-term planning. When you're on autopilot, you primarily activate primitive structures focused on immediate reward. 5. The discipline that doesn't feel like discipline. Now we reach the highest level of understanding, a stage where correct actions flow naturally, without conscious effort, without the familiar feeling of fighting oneself. Miyamoto Musashi called this action without action. When technique becomes so integrated into your nature that there's no longer a separation between who you are and how you act. This is the state we all strive for. When eating well doesn't require discipline because you've simply become the kind of person who naturally chooses nutritious foods. When exercising isn't a battle against laziness because you've become someone for whom movement is a natural expression of vitality. When focusing on important work doesn't require willpower because you've become a person who naturally prioritizes growth over distraction. The key is to understand that lasting behavior doesn't come from changing habits. It comes from changing your identity. You don't have to force yourself to act like who you want to be when you actually become that person. But how does this transformation happen? Through what I call smart environmental design, combined with micro-actions that gradually rebuild your self-image. Environmental design means making the right choices easier than the wrong ones. Instead of relying on willpower to resist temptation, you remove temptations or make healthy alternatives more accessible. If you want to eat more fruit, leave it visible and washed in the refrigerator. If you want to read more, leave a book next to your bed instead of your phone. But the most powerful aspect is identity transformation through consistent micro-actions. Every time you choose the healthy option, even in small decisions, you're sending a message to your subconscious. I am the kind of person who makes healthy choices. Over time, this new identity strengthens until it becomes your default nature. You no longer have to struggle to be disciplined because discipline has simply become who you are. It's not something you do, it's something you are. This process requires patience, but it is infinitely more sustainable than any method based on willpower. Willpower is a limited resource that runs out. Identity is a resource that strengthens with use. But I must be completely honest with you. Even knowing all these techniques, even deeply understanding the principles behind them, there will be times when you fail. Times when the old waves of compulsion are stronger than your new wisdom. Times when you find yourself repeating the very same self-destructive patterns you thought you had overcome. And it is precisely in these moments of apparent failure that you will discover whether you have truly understood the teachings of the masters. Because they didn't promise you would never stumble again, they taught you how to rise gracefully when you do. The young disciple in the story experienced exactly this. After weeks of practicing the techniques, after feeling like he had finally found his center, he had a devastating relapse. He didn't just break his promises. He broke them spectacularly, as if all the old demons had returned with renewed vigor. He sat before Lao Tzu, devastated, convinced that he was simply incapable of real change. "Master," he whispered, "I think I'm a lost cause. No matter how hard I try, I always end up back where I am." The master's answer would forever change the way he and you understand the process of personal transformation. 6. The secret laboratory of self-discipline. "My young friend," Lao Tzu said with that serene smile, "you believe you have failed because you have not yet grasped the cyclical nature of transformation. Observe the seasons. Spring does not fail when winter returns. Day does not fail when night arrives. They simply follow the natural rhythm of existence." "But Master," protested the disciple, "I promised permanent change. I should be stronger now." "And you are," Lao Tzu replied. "But true strength doesn't mean never stumbling. It means stumbling with awareness and rising with wisdom. Tell me, when you fell this time, was it exactly the same as your previous falls?" The young man thought for a moment. "Actually, no. This time I realized what was happening as it was happening. Before, I only realized it afterward, and I recovered more quickly." "Exactly," the master confirmed. "You haven't failed, you've evolved. Your consciousness has expanded. And there's something else you need to know about the specific moments when change becomes easier. Lao Tzu then revealed what he called neurological windows, specific times of day when a mind is most receptive to reprogramming. Like a wise farmer who knows the ideal seasons for planting, a spiritual seeker learns to recognize the ideal seasons of the mind to sow new patterns. The first moment is immediately upon waking, when your brain is in the alpha state, relaxed yet alert. During these first few minutes, before the day's worries invade your consciousness, you have direct access to your subconscious. It's the perfect time to plant positive intentions through the 3 morning commands technique. Before you pick up the phone, before you get out of bed, make 3 silent declarations about who you choose to be today. Not lofty goals or impossible promises, simply 3 qualities you want to embody. Today, I choose to be patient. Today, I choose to be focused. Today, I choose to be kind to myself. The second moment is before sleep, when the brain enters the theta state, the same state experienced during deep meditation. In this state, the subconscious mind is highly receptive to new programming. Instead of reviewing the day's failures or worrying about tomorrow, use these precious minutes to mentally review moments when you acted in accordance with your highest values. This process, which neuroscience calls memory consolidation, literally rewrites your neural connections to favor positive behaviors. You're teaching your brain to recognize and reward the versions of yourself you most want to strengthen. The third moment occurs during transitions, those spaces between one activity and another when your mind shifts focus. Instead of automatically filling these spaces with distractions, use them as opportunities for micro-recalibration. A conscious breath, a reflective question. Does this next action bring me closer or further away from who I want to be? But the most revolutionary discovery is that these moments aren't just opportunities for individual change. They're portals to a deeper transformation of your relationship with reality. When you learn to consciously use these neurological windows, something extraordinary happens. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and become the conscious architect of your experience. The 3 sacred moments technique. Miyamoto Musashi discovered that the difference between an ordinary warrior and a master was not the absence of fear or hesitation, but the ability to consciously choose one's response in crucial moments. He identified 3 types of moments that determine the course of any battle, whether external or internal. The first sacred moment is what he called the moment before the moment. That instant when you sense a challenging situation approaching, but still have time to mentally prepare. It's when you see that a difficult conversation will be necessary. When you realize you're entering a situation that historically triggers your worst impulses. When you anticipate a period of stress or temptation. Instead of simply reacting when the moment arrives, you use this preparation time to consciously choose who you want to be in the upcoming situation. It's like the archer who not only aims at the target, but calibrates their mind, their breathing, their entire posture before releasing the arrow. The second sacred moment is the moment of the moment, the exact instant when you're in the eye of the storm, when the pressure is at its highest, when old automatic patterns are screaming for control. This is the mountain breathing moment we discussed earlier. Here, you don't try to change or control the external situation. You simply choose to remain centered while the chaos unfolds around you. The third sacred moment is the moment after the moment, those precious minutes right after a challenging situation when your mind is still processing what happened. This is the most important time for your evolution because it's when you consolidate the lessons learned and program your mind to respond better next time. Instead of simply moving on, pause and ask yourself 3 simple questions. What worked well in this situation? What do I do differently? How can I use this experience to strengthen myself? This process transforms each challenge into an opportunity for conscious growth. Sun Tzu teaches us that every ending is a new beginning. Every moment after moment is a chance to rewrite your story, to choose a different narrative about who you are and what you're capable of. Now we have reached the end of this journey, but also the true beginning of your transformation. Because the final revelation that Lao Tzu shared with his young disciple, and which I now share with you, is that discipline is not something acquired from the outside in. It is something you remember from the inside out. My young friend, the master said on that last day, you have spent months trying to become disciplined, as if discipline were an external object that could be captured and possessed. But discipline is not something you have. It is something you are. You always have been. You simply forgot. The disciple looked confused. How can I have always been disciplined if my entire life has been marked by uncontrolled impulses? Lao Tzu smiled and pointed to a nearby tree. Look at that tree. Does it struggle to grow? Does it force its leaves to photosynthesize? Does it struggle to keep its roots in the ground during a storm? No, master. She just is. Exactly. And yet, see how much discipline there is in its nature. Every leaf grows exactly where it needs to grow to capture the most light. Every root extends precisely in the direction of water and nutrients. Every branch positions itself so as not to compete destructively with the others. The tree is a miracle of organization, efficiency, and purpose, and all of this happens without conscious effort. So you're saying discipline is natural? I'm saying that you are a miracle of nature, just like the tree. Your heart beats without you having to remind it. Your lungs breathe without conscious supervision. Your body heals wounds, digests food, maintains an ideal temperature. All of this is discipline in its purest form, happening automatically because it is your essential nature. The problem, Lao Tzu continued, is that you have been taught to disregard this natural wisdom and try to override it with artificial systems based on force and control. It is like trying to improve the growth of a plant by pulling its leaves up with strings. This conversation reveals the deepest truth about self-discipline. You don't need to become something you're not. You need to stop being something you've never been. You don't need to acquire discipline. You need to remove the obstacles that are blocking the natural expression of your intrinsic discipline. Miyamoto Musashi discovered this in his final years. After decades of perfecting complex sword techniques, he realized that his moments of greatest mastery came when he stopped trying and simply allowed his training to express itself naturally. The path is found through daily practice, he wrote, but mastery is found when practice becomes nature. Sun Tzu reached the same conclusion in his understanding of strategy. The supreme excellence is to subdue the enemy without fighting. Applied to personal discipline, this means that the most complete victory comes when you stop fighting yourself and begin working with the natural forces of your psyche. So what is the final invitation? It's not about becoming disciplined. It's about awakening the discipline that already exists at your core. It's not about adding more rules and systems to your life. It's about removing the beliefs and habits that are interfering with your natural wisdom. Start small. Choose an area of your life where you've struggled with self-discipline. Instead of creating a complex plan for change, simply begin to observe with curiosity how you function in this area. When do you act in accordance with your deepest values? When do you act against them? What facilitates positive choices? What hinders them? This non-judgmental observation is the first step toward removing obstacles to your natural discipline. You'll discover that, like the tree, you have an inner organizational wisdom that knows exactly how to grow toward the light. The ancient promise is fulfilled like this. When you stop trying to control your mind through force and begin to understand it through wisdom, it naturally aligns with your highest purposes. Not because you forced it, but because that has always been its true nature. The inner teacher doesn't need to be created. It already exists. It has always existed. You simply need to stop interfering with its natural expression. And when that happens, when you discover the discipline that doesn't feel like discipline, you will finally understand what Lao Tzu meant when he whispered, "Controlling the mind is the way to liberate life." The journey began with a question: why can't I have control over my own mind? It ends with a discovery: you've always had that control. You've just forgotten how to use it. Now you remember. If this journey has awakened something within you, if you recognize the truth behind these ancient words, write in the comments which technique touched your heart the most and how you intend to apply it. And if you feel ready to delve even deeper into this wisdom, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the next revelation I share could change your life forever.